Hello, and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Doof Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most shortest work, 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we're here, it's our final episode, huh?
Final regular episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. And this episode is a weird one to end on because it's the calm after the storm. Is that an expression? It's the opposite of the calm before the storm.
It's also, it's the Pact version of the calm after the storm.
Yeah.
I never get teary or cry when reading. For me, it's a lot more common in movies and TV for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It happened a number of times during this chapter. You're right. This is the end in many ways. I'm not looking forward to the experience of the epilogue. I'm going to be a mess, I think.
Yes.
Thanks to everyone who's come along with us, because I think part of the reason it's affected me so much is how closely we've been following the book and this journey we've been going on with everyone who's listening.
Yeah. I'm tempted to dive more into talking about Pact as a whole, but we're going to have 24 hours of that, so let's save it for that.
There's no need to rush.
Yes, in case you somehow don't know what we're talking about the fact that we're doing a 24-hour live stream on Saturday the 7th of March. You can check out the link in the description to find out more. It's going to be really fun. We're going to talk about the show in general, what we thought about it, a bunch of segments, have a bunch of special guests. Wildbow will be there, a bunch of the Doof Media hosts will be there. It's just going to be a whole fun experience.
Yeah, and we've sort of been highlighting segments for each episode, and I think one of the last ones I wanted to talk about here is we're opening that with recording the episode, and we've already sort of talked about that. But then after that, the next hour is pretty much just dedicated to us chatting with whoever's on the stream at that point, and just talking about the show, the story, just a bit of a debrief after finishing, the whole experience. So, if you're the sort of person who's been listening along as we go, you're definitely the sort of person we want to come along for that second hour.
Yeah, we'll basically just be talking about the story as a whole. Now that you actually see it as a complete picture, Elliot, we can re-dive into some of the things that we want to dive back into with that in mind, stuff like that.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, but one last time, let's talk about Judgment 1613. Let's talk about this chapter.
Yep.
Which opens with, the Dark Tower kind of falling apart without this demon holding it together. And
Kingslingers, now available on doofmedia.com.
Yeah, sorry, I was just binging Kingslingers, and so everything in my head is Dark Towers. But yeah, basically it's all turning to a smoke, a liquidy, kind of heavy liquid smoke, and Blake is just kind of stuck under this fog as he crawls around as a tiny little hand. And the rest of the group kind of regroups, gets themselves in order, and begins to leave.
Yeah, but this moment where Blake just kind of gets trapped in the sort of smoky dust that's happening is just immediately setting the tone of how spent he is. I think spent is the word I want to use for where Blake's at this chapter. He doesn't really do a thing this whole chapter. We talked last chapter about how he still managed to do his one last thing, and it's now the war's over and Blake is just a passenger at best.
Yeah, I think the most agency that we see him express in this is when he blinks at somebody.
Yeah.
That's basically the only thing he can do this chapter.
I think he blinks at Evan. Yeah. And that's about it. Yeah.
That's the extent of the, ability to communicate that he has, which is pretty insane. But apart from Blake, the rest of the group, they're injured. They obviously have some wounds to lick, but they've made it through, which is nice. No, apart from the Isadora died, and that's tragic, but nobody that we care about more than Isadora died, which is good.
I definitely the vibe, I would say, of this chapter is, as you said, they're battered, they're beaten up, they're a bit of a wreck, but they're here, they're still alive, and they're making their way out. There's a bunch of sort of potential dangers that present themselves throughout the chapter, but they're all kind of pretty easily overcome. And it's really this sense of like, here we are at the end of the story, and things aren't necessarily good,
Yeah.
but they're better, and that's what it was all about.
Yeah. Should we touch on the fact that the vibe of this chapter really isn't triumphant at all? Especially not towards the start when it's very cautious, like cautiously optimistic. But even towards the end when the group kind of realizes, yes, we've won, there's never really, never really feels like there's a moment of like exhale, It never really feels like there's a moment of, okay, the war is now over.
I don't know if I completely agree. I definitely agree that it's not like, bombastically triumphant. Like, yes, we've done it. Like, let's throw a parade. It's a more like subtle uplifting. Like, I would have said it's exactly like they can just release the tension now. It's just like, okay, things are better. They're not good, but they're better, and we can look forward to the future with hope.
I guess the reason I say that is because where this chapter goes is it's not... Nobody in the group gets to a point where they think, okay, now I can sit back. We get to the end of this and it's like, okay, now the obstacles that are preventing us from doing the actual work are gone. So we can actually do the things that we want to be doing a bit more. It's not we've achieved it. It's the things that were getting in our way are finally gone.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that is like, really powerful in its own way. I agree. It's definitely a more subtle thing. It's not... we've defeated, the golden god and everything's fine now.
Yeah.
We can relax and we can actually do what we want, as you said.
Yeah.
Except for maybe our literal handyman now.
I like that. That's a good nickname for him. So just quick note, we get confirmation that Buttsack has survived this. He seems fine, so he's on the table for a sequel, so that's good.
I love how Mags still has to wrangle the goblins here.
Yeah.
Like, they're so incorrigible. Like, even here in the end, we're talking about how everyone else has this sense of, like, a melancholy or whatever. Like, melancholy would probably be the word I'd use to describe the tone of most of this chapter. But there's still the goblins, and they're still just little shits. And that's nice to know in its own way. They're still there. They're still being fuckwits.
Yeah. Yeah. One of them's pretending to be dead for some reason, just to like try and get Mags off of their case, I guess. Anyway, so Mags goes over and picks up Blake, who she had kind of assumed was dead before now, which I think was a fair assumption.
I mean, even after saying he's not dead, she also takes the time to clarify that he's not specifically alive.
Yeah.
She says alive in a manner of speaking.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like, we touched on this already, but like, yeah, Blake is just a piece of wood, basically, at this point. He doesn't even get, like, that's the thing. There's never any, in this chapter, Blake never says, like, I wanted or I thought or that. He's pretty much just narrating.
Yeah.
There's not really a Blake left.
Well, yeah.
It's sort of the vibe I got from this.
It feels very detached, except possibly at the very end, the last line, where we finally get something that feels like it's from Blake's perspective rather than just kind of narrating what's going on. We'll get to that in a bit. You're right, because, we get a description of what Blake looks like here, and he says, I was a lumpy, crude hand with a thread of flesh running over it, an eyeball tucked into the crook of her arm. And so basically, Blake is a wooden hand with an eye next to it. And that's it. That's everything that he's got, which is not great.
No, yeah, and that comes across in his, not just lack of action in this chapter, but his lack of want to do any action, his lack of opinion about anything. He really just, like, for all intents and purposes, he may as well be an inanimate object for this chapter. Like, apart from that one blink, I mean, there was a real sense as all this was going on and we're watching everyone else have these heartfelt goodbyes. I was sort of like, Blake's already gone. Like, and that sucks.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. He is, right? Like, you're right. I don't think I quite put my finger on it as much last chapter, but him grabbing Mrs. Lewis's ankle was his final act, right? Like, that's the last thing that he had the ability to do.
And I mean, that's so Blake.
Yeah, expending literally his last bit of power for this tiny shred of an action.
That ultimately led to a victory.
Yeah, definitely. So they're descending the tower, and we get more imagery of what this tower kind of crumbling is like. And crumbling isn't the right word because it's not. It kind of feels like it's dissipating, like it's being Thanos or something. It's kind of turning to dust as it collapses. It's really strange.
Yeah, but in slow-mo, kind of, like, not as rapid, and descending down. It's yeah, it's interesting. Like, we never really see what the Abyss is planning to do with this space. Like, this is a very different Abyss takeover than what happened to the Thorburn house, which is like literally everyone fell down and then 2 minutes later they were in a weird, freaky library. This is much more like the Abyss is doing this seemingly with a lot more purpose. In a way, it kind of feels less reactive. It's intentionally taking it apart piece by piece. I'd be so interested to find out what it ends up being used for or turned into by the Abyss.
Yes, that is interesting, isn't it? Because it's not like the Abyss is all about change, whereas it seems like this isn't being morphed, like you said. This isn't like, the very explicitly how the house, Hillsglade House, before was turned into the library. It's being broken down on a molecular level.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like whereas Hillsglade House was just kind of rearranged.
Yes, exactly.
In a way. And I mean, obviously as well, I think this really suits the different vibe. Like, the library being such a rapid and bombastic change really suited the frankly insane pacing of Arc 15.
Yep.
Whereas, this is the end, the melancholy, and I feel like the landscape just slowly disintegrating, including the sky, fits in with all that. Like, there is just a sense of things are ending as the world is literally slowly disappearing,
Yeah.
Like, again, it's packed, so it's working on multiple levels.
Yeah, totally. Putting aside all these nice metaphors for a second, we see Green Eyes is safe, which is good. We saw nothing of her last chapter, so the fact that she is safe and alive is good. But obviously, it kind of immediately gets seeded that something's up with Green Eyes, and it doesn't take a huge leap of logic to realize that Green Eyes is
getting ready to kill
Rose.
Rose.
Exactly, right? Like Green Eyes, and even later on, there's these bits where Green Eyes is responding very kind of morosely, very grimly, and it's quite clear that she's like, yes, I'll play along for now, but as soon as I get my chance, Rose, you and me are going to have it out.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, as soon as we sort of meet Green Eyes on the stairs here, this seed is just planted of, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Very, very soon. And I think that's something this chapter maybe does a few times. Like, we're about to get to Barbatorem being at the bottom of the tower, and it's sort of like, I think reading Pact, we've been trained to just anticipate another shoe dropping once they beat something. So even though I knew there was only one chapter left, I kept waiting for things to still go back to being like a shitty, chaotic mess for a little while.
Yeah.
And I think this chapter's having fun with that by setting up things like Green Eyes and Barbatorem and, Miss Lewis being the prisoner, and all of them just kind of actually being resolved fairly cleanly without any problems.
Well, yeah. It's not... I think that's the grander theme of what this chapter and the whole story is trying to tell us is...
Yeah.
The point of the story so far has kind of been Blake and Rose desperately trying to fight against the heavy weight of all the shit that's been dumped on them. And at every turn, they've made some progress, but they've also been kind of pushed back as they go. And so if this chapter ended with, and now here's another thing that's going to be dumped on you, it would kind of be like, well, there's no end to it, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what the story's trying to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Things have just continuously impacted and not gotten better. And then in this chapter, they have. And like that really adds to this sense of the ending here. Because, yeah, there are problems here, and they all just sort of overcome them, and everyone's reasonable, and it's just kind of like, yeah, things are better now. There's challenges, but they can overcome them because they know they can.
Things can be improved. Problems can be solved eventually,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so...
It's a great way to finish it up.
Yeah, exactly. So they reach the bottom of the tower and they regroup with the ones that were left behind, and they begin to venture outside where the barber is waiting.
God, it's good to have Evan back. I think like I can see now, like it was totally, I think, the right move to take Evan out of the final conflict because it was sort of very serious. We still had Peter and Buttsack when we needed to have a laugh, but like I just would have been worried about Evan the whole time, and it gave us more space to have Blake and Rose interact a lot more. So I totally get why Evan was left out of this ultimate final boss battle. But God, it also works because now we get him back, and I just realized how much I missed him. Like he as things are resolving and there's sadness, like the fact that the story's ending, it's good to have Evan to cheer us back up alongside that.
Yeah, I think he probably needed to take a bit of a backseat so that we could get to some of the darker and more intense stuff. And, the moment where he sees Blake is pretty great.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think, like, the Evanness of him hits us harder because we've been missing him for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Can we talk about the fact that Barbatorem has kept on Johannes's corpse, for now, at least? Because it's so unsettling and unnecessary. And I love the way that it kind of seems odd at first, and then it gets contextualized later by him just trying to do another thing to get your attention, to try and make you focus on him more.
Yeah, I think you could also sort of talk about how it might symbolize the fact that he doesn't move on or move forward. Like, we were just saying how there's a real sense in this chapter that this group has overcome their burdens in a way, and now they're able to move forward, and Barbatorem is not doing that. He's clinging on to these scraps of Johannes that he's still got.
Yeah, and then he pops. Which is wild. It's really fucked up.
Yeah, this is one of the big moments in the chapter, like when they're just walking. Barbatorem just screams himself to the point where Johannes explodes.
Yeah.
I also think it really hits you as a moment because the first thing after that is Noah, the leader of the Rat Pack, just saying "good." Which is fucking brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in a way that's our farewell to Johannes. Is Noah shitting on him?
Yeah.
It's such a strong moment in the chapter.
Yeah, I still feel like Johannes has been a bit hard done by this book, but yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about that on the live stream.
Yes, I think we should.
I think there's a segment in particular that's going to come up, but yeah, I mean, look, he's gone now, and I think for better or worse, he probably didn't deserve what he got, but anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, the group is kind of shuffling on, and Barbatorem is kind of desperately trying to get their attention, because if he gets their attention, he can kind of re-engage them and force them to keep fighting him. But Rose's response is basically, no, we're past this now, we're beyond this, you can't touch us.
Yeah, and like, this is so cool. This big, powerful demon who was kind of the big bad has just been reduced to, I mean, like this little attention seeker.
Yeah.
Like he's trying to do all of this terrible shit to get their attention. As he said, they just all don't look, and then it amounts to nothing. It's such a pure and great way to round out everything this arc in particular has been talking about.
Yes, I do really like it. I kind of wish that Barbatorem started doing like street magic and stuff to try and get their attention, but obviously would have been a bit of a conflicting tone. Yeah, it's such a weird, it's like this reverse staring contest where they have to not look at him, which is something that has been hinted at throughout the story with things like the fight or Barbatorem in the library. These things where not looking at him was a key part of how you dealt with this, but it takes on a different kind of like superior tone now. It's not looking at him, it's still for the same reason of not giving him an in, but it's like, we're beyond you now, we don't need to bother with you. It's such an interesting tone.
Yeah, you're right. Well, before it was defensive because it was like looking at them was the one thing they needed to get in and beat you. And now the other one, it's like he's already beaten. They just need to not look at him so that he can't sneak back in.
Yes.
I mean, for me, something that jumped to mind was in 15.x, there was that mention of how like speech was something that's inverted in demons, like it's the young ones and the old ones who can speak, and the more moderate ones can't. And like that's sort of what Barbatorem is reduced to now is just kind of screaming and throwing a tantrum like a child, which is where, or a toddler. Like that's where his speech level's at, and that's where his behavior ends up right here. Like he's just throwing a attention tantrum, and it's not working.
Yeah, I like that comparison. That's really good. I love the moment where Rose is really confident about like, yeah, we've beaten him 3 times, and then I think it's Lola who dives into it, and it's so obviously bluster. Like one of the times is when Rose Senior first bound him, which is she's just taking credit for it, but of course they can't question it, and that kind of leads to it working. The fact that they just kind of believe, yes, it counts is enough to take down this now quite weakened demon.
Yeah, well, I mean, like that's the thing, right? Is it's flimsy, but there's a shred of like, I guess that makes sense. Like, because Rose's specific
Yes.
point, I think, is she's like, if karma works that way, like if I can get the bad sides, then like fuck this shit. I want the good parts of this
Yeah.
Bloodwines bullshit, and like there's just enough sense there that like all of them can just not question it, and it holds, and I really like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and this is it. They keep walking, and eventually Barbatorem falls behind, and he's gone. And that's the last we see of him. And it's interesting. It's not. It's a whimper of an ending. It's not like a. We already got the climactic battle ending, and this is the kind of whimpering ending of him in the story. And it's so. I don't know the word for it. It's like vague, like not like we know that he's done. We know that they've won unambiguously, but it's such a vague ending because they have to by necessity not look at him or think about him, and so kind of it ends in this weird, tantalizing way.
Yeah, I think whimpering was the perfect word for it. Like it's this small, unimportant, undignified ending. That's what it is.
Yeah,
He doesn't get to die in the glory of battle or whatever. It's just like he dies, in the background, nobody's even looking at him. He's throwing a tantrum, and it's this small, undignified death of what he deserves. And yeah,
yeah.
like I think it's really great.
I
In
think
like a lesser work, like if this was a comic book series, I'd be like, oh well, now they can just bring Barbatorem back. But here it's like, okay, he's gone, and he's gone
yeah.
in the most pathetic way possible, and that is the ultimate defeat.
Yeah, I guess that's what the point is. In a world so defined by theatrics, if he was defeated in some grand play, then it would be like, oh, well, now he can have this big revenge or whatever. But the kind of whimpering finale of Barbatorem just reduces him so much from this hulking threat of a demon to just this mosquito that you ignore. You don't even
Yeah,
swat.
exactly.
Yeah. I guess similarly, Miss Lewis is kind of unceremoniously dumped in a ditch, and Buttsack kind of pushes her down. She tumbles, and she just kind of gets caught in the sinking ground into the abyss. And they again just turn their back on her and walk on her.
Yeah, like dumping her in a ditch is just the perfect expression, because that's like what it is. They're just saying, oh, that's a hole in the ground that she'll fall into the abyss in. Just toss her in. It's equally undignified. The butt sack moment, or part of it, is hilarious. Like just how they go to ask him to do it, and they don't even have to finish before he's fucking flicking her in there. He's so eager to be a little shithead. I love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like much like the barber, she gets her own kind of pathetic death.
Yeah, so Rose kind of kicks a slab on her, which hits her, and she just kind of struggles for a bit and then stops struggling as she sinks in. And Rose does a bit of a, like, badass final line, and I had this response of, like, yeah, it's an okay line. Like, it doesn't feel like it's super badass. I think Rose is still kind of learning how to be a badass, but it is a nice little send off, like, okay, now you're done, and we'll just turn our back on you and walk away.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like bad at this stuff like Rose, because I thought it was pretty badass.
Yeah, I think it's good for, okay, here's what I'd say. I think it would be good if a real person came up with it off the top of their head. Like, okay, that's pretty good. But if comparing it to a movie where someone would write a badass line, it doesn't stack up. And I guess that's good that it's more realistic, but, it doesn't deliver on the, like, high theatricality, I think.
Yeah, fair. I don't know. It did for me, but like, maybe I'm just easily pleased with that stuff. I don't know.
Fair enough. And yeah, that's Mrs. Lewis, who was a fun antagonist, a mysterious
Yeah.
sociopath. But yeah, I do kind of wish we learned a bit more about, how she got in her circumstance. But I think, again, the lawyers can only get to that position because they are forced into making stupid decisions. And so seeing her make some stupid decisions probably would have taken away from our impression of her.
Yeah, you're right. Like her origin story would maybe take away some of the mystery, if nothing else. And like showing her at her low point would take away from the mystique of how fucking like powerful and strong she was for most of this.
Mm.
You're right. She was always one of the most fun antagonists. Like even all the way back in Arc 2 when you were trying so hard not to like her, but you kind of did.
Yeah, totally.
It was really fun.
Yeah. But yeah, Barbatorem checked off, the lawyers checked off, and so the group finally allows themselves to admit that they've won, and they decide, they start to plan what they should do next.
Yeah, and this is where it starts to get really sad because this is basically all the final goodbyes, and it's it's emotional.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is, and we get these moments of each character deciding what they're doing next. Rose's choice is to help clean up the town, which is good, clean up some of the mess that she now owns as the Lady of Jacob's Bell.
Yeah.
But she interestingly decides she wants to write more diabolic texts, which I think is a really nice conclusion to her arc of, the goal of breaking the wheel. They obviously haven't fully done that. They've taken some steps towards it, and there's this feeling that their victory will count for so much more if they can use it to build momentum about how other practitioners can kind of get out from under the systems that have been oppressing them.
Yeah, like the whole idea of these particularly diabolic texts being spread around like this is something that's come up like at various points throughout the story, and this is such a perfect delivery on that concept. And you're right, like it so suits Rose. It's just it's a great sort of epilogue, for want of a better word, for her character arc. Like as soon as I read this, I was like, of course that's what she's going to do. I'd maybe think about rebranding them from Diabolic if you really want them to spread that well.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about that, but I kind of see it as how, we have like the Church of the Satanists, right, which is basically a way for people to gather under the idea that they're protesting against all the things that are terrible about organized religion, right? I kind of see it as a similar thing where it's diabolic, but it's because it's subversive to the current system, not because it's bad,
Yeah, that's fair. But just, the whole
it is
a branding issue.
There is baggage to that name, yeah.
I don't know, but like, with things like Black Lamb's Blood and all that, like you can totally see the place for this sort of work in the world. Yeah, like I really like this as the sort of answer to where Rose is going after all this.
Yeah. So we know what Rose's plans are. The rest of the group kind of gets their moments of talking about what they're going to do next and then leaving the group and presumably the story. So Lola is the first to leave, and then Mags and Peter and Ainsley. It's sad.
Yeah, like yeah, I don't know. This is where I started to tear up as we started doing these goodbyes. And it's funny because some of these characters weren't even like that important for most of the story, Like someone like Lola, like how much has she even been in it? But it still mattered to me so much at the end here. It's really well done.
Yeah. It's a nice vibe, isn't it? It because it's these characters deciding for themselves what they should do. Finally, they're under from the thumb of their systems. Lola Duchamp, she's free from the Duchamps now, although she kind of chooses to maintain the family connection. We finally get to see what these people want to do outside of the things that have been thrust upon them.
Yeah, and so all these goodbyes being in sequence like this really starts to hammer home like one of the other things that we were doing with this bring one person from each family on the mission thing, where it's like, as you said, they Rose brings up they were all told and taught to hate each other, and now they're here and they've made their lives better and they've beaten that, and now they're all kind of friends, and so there's this real sense of hope as each of them leaves on good terms, talking about what they're going to do and how they're going to stay in touch, and it's just like the social order of all these people is so much better than it was at the start of the book, despite the state of the town.
Yeah, exactly. And we get specific versions of that as well, right? Like Lola's decision is to go and kind of help pick up the pieces of her family, which is so interesting because, the whole Arc 13 was about getting the Junior Duchamps away from the systems. And now Lola is going back, not to those systems, but to her family, to rebuild this in a different way, which I think is really like a great representation of like, yes, this is hopefulness and forgiveness and empathy that can be learned in this universe.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they've sort of destroyed the system, but that doesn't mean her family is nothing, and she's going to go and try and help them through this, and hopefully make the family better. And
Yeah.
that's so great.
Yeah, Mags has a bit of an ominous ending, I'll admit. She basically talks about how, well, she doesn't talk about it this explicitly, but it's kind of clear that she still feels slave to her destiny, right? Things were obviously quite predetermined for Blake and Rose, and this whole story for them has been them getting out from under that. But Mags is still under it, and she talks about things like the three instances of blood, fire, and darkness to be expected, and then she talks about things like how she's going to hunt down the fairies, which fair enough. It feels like she has things that she feels like she needs to do rather than necessarily wants to do, but it's obviously a bit blurry.
Yeah, you're right. She does more than anyone else give off the vibe of not being past all of her existing problems yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I got massive Pact 2 setup vibes.
Yeah, me
out
too,
of this
a bit,
section.
to be honest.
It's just like the mag segment basically consists of, hey, remember I still have another big blood, fire, and darkness coming up, and also I got to go find Podrick. And it's just kind of like, I was just kind of Pact 2, let's do it. Pact 2, Mags,
you know what
I'm ready.
Makes me think that the most is that, how Wildbow does the cross references to other stories in his stories, and there's like the Maggie Holt series of books. I think it's in Worm. I'm not 100% sure.
They're in Ward for sure,
right? And to me, that's kind of like, well, is there enough here for a whole series of books? Not yet. All right, get on it, Wildbow.
Yeah.
And then we get the departure of Ainsley, which didn't leave that much of an impression on me. But Peter goes with her, which I found very interesting. Because Peter's departure is like he leaves on good terms with Rose, of course, but with this vibe of like, we'll be in touch, right?
Yeah.
And not just because we're cousins, but because now I'm a part of this world. And it's crazy to me that Peter could go through this experience and still want to be more ingrained in the world of Pact. Like, I get that he would never be able to let things go back to normal, but he doesn't even pretend to try.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I want to pull out this one line that I think summarizes Peter's whole exit. Which is when he turns to Rose and says, "You're not all that bad for a Thorburn." And like that's just the Thorburn experience right there. And we've just talked about how there's been so much healing between all the families here, like the Deschamps and the Behaims, and there's a peace between all the members of this crew. But wait, there's a peace in amongst most of these Thorburns now, which is the true miracle of Pactmas.
Yeah, it does feel like the Thorburns are this microcosm of the practitioner community, right? Where practitioners are naturally set up to be at conflict with each other, as these Thorburns kind of represent. But it's kind of proven here between, Rose and Blake and Peter and Paige and all of them. No, there's a better way to do this. There's a more wholesome way that this can be done.
Yeah, and Peter, I think, has always kind of represented to me, like, he's always been the most Thorburniest Thorburn in a lot of ways, so it's so perfect to use him for this here. Like, he's stepped up, he's gotten better, and he and Rose sort of ended it with this idea of, hey, I'm actually looking forward to talking to a family member.
Yeah.
That's fucking weird. And it's like one of the... It was probably the most uplifting part of this for me. Like, just seeing that even the Thorburn relationships, like the intra-family relationships, are being repaired. That really added to this sense of the accomplishment of this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we should talk about Paige as the next to leave. It touches on...
Before we go to Paige, I think we should touch on it. Like we kind of skipped over Ainsley, and I do feel like because Ainsley's leaving honestly has more to do with Alistair. Like again, it plants these seeds of
which is her life story, I think.
Yeah, it's very Ainsley. And yeah, I don't know. There's like hints like this is one of the only times Blake interjects in the whole chapter with his own thought, which is when Ainsley sort of says, "Oh, it's nice that you're thinking about my cousin," Blake thinks to himself, "I did give her the ability to care for others. Like, I hope that's enough." Basically, he's shipping them. They're engaged. It's not really shipping, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know. It's just a nice little moment again of like hope that this relationship can work out now because of Blake's donation.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's optimistic setting for the future.
Yeah.
So Paige leaves, and again, we get more lines around these familial bonds being repaired. I think another thing to talk about here is obviously In Pact. The kind of weight of family has been a big theme, mostly negative weight of family, and this is kind of a step of nope. Family can be a good thing. It's a support system. It's love. It's trust, and that's kind of what it is being shaped into through this shared horrifying experience.
Yeah, like the page excerpt really complements the Peter one because Peter was representative of the relationship with the larger family, whereas like I think Paige always represented something more personal because she was Ross's friend.
Yeah.
And that was really lost to them between the Barbatoreming and the Erring. So ending it with Paige and them wanting to keep in touch is not just optimistic because the bonds of the family are being repaired, but that like things that were broken are becoming fixed. So it complements this idea of healing, like, because it's not just that things are getting better, but it's, things that we lost can come back to us in new ways.
Yeah, I really like that. It's an emblem of, well, they say that whatever's taken away by a demon can never be replaced, but that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, well, it can't be recovered, but it could be
sure,
replaced.
Yes, can't be recovered,
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, and it's not, you're right, it's not being recovered as such, it's being reborn, I guess.
Yeah, it's like with Blake and Evan, like their connection was cut and it never came back. Evan never truly became his familiar again, but they instantly formed another sort of close connection that was different, but powerful in its own way.
Yeah. So with the rest of the party off, it's just Rose and the others with a capital O, and she kind of collapses, and we get to this final problem. Rose is too weak to survive without consuming the last remaining bit of Blake, and Green Eyes knows this, and Rose knows that Green Eyes knows this, and so they're in this weird standoff of what are we going to do?
Oh, yeah, but even before we get there is just a little bit where it's just after Rose collapses, and there's just... I mean, I know I was like reading a book, so I can't hear that there's silence, but there totally was. Like, there was totally just a moment of, it's... Because it's Blake, and he's here with Rose, Green Eyes, and Evan. The Rat Pack's there too.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's the three people who have been with Blake for the whole story.
Yeah.
And it's this it feels like the final moment.
Yeah. It's interesting because I reckon, like, Green Eyes has a pretty solid case here, right? Like, how it would be so hard to trust Rose at all in this situation. And really what Rose is saying is, yes, look, I'm going to eat Blake and I'll try and help him as much as I can when I get my strength back, but it's unlikely that that's going to happen. But, what else are we meant to do, right? Like, this is what Blake kind of wanted. What are we going to do here? And Green Eyes accepts. It's such a wild thing for her to accept because it is such a non-offer, really, but she does. And it's this moment of, like, we can work towards achieving peace and achieving better, healthier relationships here. All the characters that have been here have been in conflict with each other at multiple points throughout this book. But finally, they agree to work together, and it's this perfect counter to the idea that there needs to be conflict between these, in these systems.
Yeah, I mean, Rose doesn't even sort of explicitly say she's going to try.
Yeah.
With Blake, she just
she says, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to do anything.
Yeah, but wait, she doesn't say, I can't guarantee, but I'm going to try. I think she just mentions the can't guarantee thing. So there's a real sense of, like, you're right, the trust that Green Eyes extends here, or the kind of acceptance. I mean, we've already talked about how not Blake is. It's hard to know. It's Pact, so that could be a factor. It could be, the Abyss might be wanting to help Rose out. I mean, I could read all sorts of in-universe things, but I much prefer this grander metaphor that you're talking about of Green Eyes, choosing not violence, which isn't really something we've seen her do before.
Yeah, it is I mean, I would say out of character, but it's not. It's growth of her character because she's
Yeah.
always resolved things through violence, right? And this
Mm.
explicitly, like even to Blake, who is one of the closest people to her, even to Blake, this was something of, well, there's no way she's going to not resolve this through violence when it comes up, so let's try and keep
Yeah.
her away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a perfect way to symbolize, yes, growth, good.
Yeah, and again, it really emphasized to me that feeling of these are our four most mainest characters,
Yeah.
and here they all are at the end, and they're all going to do what they can to save Blake.
Yeah. So Rose turns to Blake and consumes him, and it all goes dark.
Thank God I know there's an epilogue, because like this is the most what the fuck kind of ending. Like the fact that it ends here, I was just left sitting there like, what?
No, he's gone. He's gone for good. So that's that. See you later, Blake. You had a good ride. Good work.
Yeah, I mean he did good, our old Blakey.
Yeah. And so Rose kind of reaches down and kind of snaps him apart and digs for the flesh inside of him. And as she does this, she says, "Damn it, damn it, damn it," which is a great kind of circular callback to the beginning of the story. And I think it's happened one or two other times where Blake has said, "Damn me, them, damn it all." And
I
Rose,
think he's done it twice. This would technically be the
This is the
three
third,
beat
yes.
of the triple damn, the ninth damn it.
but it's different because it's not damning others anymore, others with a lowercase or an uppercase O. It's damning it. It's damning the system, Elliot. Damn the system. Yes, come everyone else. Them, all of you, come and we'll fight the system together.
Yep, and well, yeah, I mean they've already started.
Yeah.
You're right. It is a nice little reflection of how the story began, to kind of tie things up, and yeah, that's how it ends. And now I
That's
guess
it.
we've got an epilogue, and that's it. That's so crazy.
So, do you want? Have you staked a solid claim on what's going to be in the epilogue?
I don't think so.
I can tell you, we go and we just explore the shepherd's backstory, and we finally find out what happened with those three weird kids. And we answer that question, and none of the main characters ever come up. It's just the shepherd who we explore.
Very odd choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's going to be whatever. I think Rose is going to manage to do it. You know, she hinted to Green Eyes that she had a plan for what she was going to do with whatever bits of Blake were left. So I guess maybe we'll get something from Blake's perspective, because I feel like we closed the door on Rose again. I know in 16.7 when we traded places with her, I got the sense that Rose was done. So like, I don't know what she's planning to do with Blake here, but like I feel like whatever's left of Blake is going to be the epilogue.
I'm excited for your live read of it. I think that'll be a very fun one to read along with.
Oh man, I'm going to be in tears the whole time. I bet. Like it's going to be a rough read.
We'll see. Yeah.
But-
So that's that. That's the story, Elliot. I guess we have one last thing to do this episode, which is to talk about our discussion question. We were asking the audience, what does pact mean to you? And we got a lot of different and very soulful answers we'll dive into. But I guess, do we have anything else to say on like pact before, before we do our live stream, before we say goodbye to this story for good?
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good ride, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm still processing that we've reached the end of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I still don't think it's properly hit me that we've reached the end of this story/podcast yet, Elliot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that'll happen over the course of the 24 hours on this.
Yeah, about 16 hours in, we'll both have a meltdown as we realise it's the end.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we'll be without sleep for a while. It's not the least likely thing.
We will be in the place to have a meltdown.
Yeah, we'll talk more about what pact means to us, the two of us, next time on the stream.
Yeah.
But we will dive into this discussion question. And I want to start with, I think, what was the most soulful answer that we got, which was by Hero of Old Iron, who told a very personal story about the point that their life was at when Pact first started. And they kind of talk about how Pact started at a point when their life went in some really challenging directions, and they found themselves relating to Blake a lot. And this was something that came up through a couple of answers was, Pact is weirdly, I mean, I don't know if optimistic is the right word, but it's the most tenacious of Wildbow's stories. You know, it really does say explicitly, you know, you can have terrible situations thrown at you, but perseverance and dedication and loyalty and a lot of really admirable traits that we saw in Blake before he went all murder, can really help you pull through to the better version of what can come next. And so Hero of Old Iron kind of talks about how this was a message that really did help them start taking steps to help get their life back on track. And so they consider it having saved their life in some of their darker places, which is, I think, a really powerful sentiment that sums up the interesting emotional core of Pact.
Yeah, and I think a few people touched on this, but like Hero's answer really solidified it to me. Like, because Pact, like, you know, you hear about people dropping Pact because it was grinding them down, and I get that, but then you can also see why people who finish the story don't get that, because once we've reached the end here, it is a strangely and subtly uplifting ending, because you know we had to go through being ground down like that by the story to appreciate how good it feels at the end. And I think that's sort of what Hero starts to touch on is, you know, they were holding on to seeing how Blake and co made it through, and then when you get that, it feels so satisfying after watching the struggle that it just means so much to you, and you know, clearly meant so much to Hero of Old Iron, and that's the power of stories right there.
Yeah, I found it a very beautiful answer. I think Hero of Old Iron was able to capture these feelings that we've been trying to express in a way that was very personal and very relatable.
It was such a genuine answer. Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah. We got a response from Kyrgyzstan, who talks about how Pact was the work that really turned them into a Wildbow stan. You know, they finished Worm and really loved it, of course, as everyone does. And then they came back later and discovered Pact and realized, like, you know, this is a whole world of content that I can enjoy, and they've been on the Wildbow train ever since.
Yeah, absolutely. Ace of Sword sort of just, again, touches on how, you know, Pact really taught them how much you can do just through determination and force of will. Specifically, they brought up, like, Worm and comparisons to Taylor. Like, Taylor was this great character, but she had, like, a great superpower, you know? Like, she got one that was kind of, you know, it's a bit of a meme how much it gets underestimated in Worm. Yeah. And like, I think everyone, when they first pick up Worm, underestimates what you can do controlling a bunch of bugs.
Yeah, totally.
But, you know, Blake's gift is a bunch of bad karma and basically being shat on by the world constantly. And he just refuses to give up, and he perseveres just through determination and his own, like, you know, wittiness. His own, like, wits and his friends.
Yep. And his stubbornness.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so much more powerful in its own way.
Yeah, definitely. We had a response from Juanson, who basically sums it up as saying, the past sucked, the present is, whatever, but the trajectory is pointing upwards. You know, there is a possibility for a better future, and that's the lesson of Pact, which I really like. I mean,
yeah, like, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Like, and you see a lot of this, like, people talk about how, you know, the news or whatever seems to get worse and worse. Like, people constantly think society is getting worse, but generally, you know, if you look at crime stats or whatever, things are in an upward trend, and so there is, like, a part of that, you know, you do have to appreciate that, you know, we're getting better, and that doesn't mean you stop. You keep fighting, but
exactly.
We are making things better, and that's you know, worth holding on to because it motivates you to keep improving.
Yeah, it's this interesting distillation of the core concept of, like, yes, there are so many things wrong with the present, but if you look at the past and you look at where we are today, look at that trajectory and think, okay, those people fought to get us to this point, and we can continue to fight to get us to the next point. Yeah, it is such an uplifting message, I think.
Yeah,
Juanson explicitly contrasts it to fantasy and the idea of, like, look at this kind of medieval magical version of the past and how cool it was. But Pact is this inversion of that where, like, yeah, there were some cool things about that, but also it was so shitty in a lot of ways, and you can actually break away from the systems that made it shitty that you know, medieval fantasy or whatever doesn't usually touch on, and it's such a great reversal of that, I guess.
Oh yeah, like, you know, Lord of the Rings is kind of the quintessential example of everything fantasy, and like, you know, it serves here. I mean, if you sort of look at the socio-political structures in Middle Earth, there's a lot of not so great stuff mixed in there, not just on the orc side of things.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you just kind of have to push that stuff away from your view as you're engaging with those sorts of materials, whereas Pact confronts all that stuff head on.
Yeah, it's great. We get another response. We got a response from Farm Fresh Hornets, who again talks about Pact bringing them solace through the ideas of Blake's stubbornness and determination leading to better outcomes, which I liked. We got a response from Sandwich that I also identified strongly with, which was
yes.
That Pact makes other magic systems pale in comparison, which is, yeah, is very true. Like, something that I think we've talked about before, but bears repeating, is Wildbow as an author is so good at kind of retroactively justifying tropes and making them so natural and fit so well. And so many things in Pact fall into that, ways of like making things that would appear in other magical systems but be things that you had to kind of blur your eyes a bit to get past, making them just so natural and intuitive.
Yeah, like Pact in many ways seems purpose-built to allow Wildbow to have in-universe explanations for tropes and to play off of them because of that. I totally agree, like, with Sandwich in that, like, I've watched other things and thought, yeah, this could all work in Pact, or I've thought this isn't as good as Pact. But those are like the two frames of mind I'm in now. Is either oh, this is a subset of Pact, or this is not as good as Pact. And
yep.
Yeah, like I think I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I went on a journey of reading the Harry Potter books, most of them for the first time while this podcast was going on. I actually gave up halfway through the fourth one just because by the fourth one it was starting to fall apart a bit, like in terms of world building, and things weren't making as much sense, and I just wasn't getting into it anymore. And that's partially probably Pact's fault.
Yeah, I mean, if you do want a version of the Harry Potter stories that tries to be a bit more internally consistent, let me turn you onto something called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I've got a few more answers I want to get through first.
Yeah, well, we should definitely touch on Stuck in Reddit Factory's answer,
Yes.
and this is kind of launching off of that point as well, because Stuck in Reddit Factory talks about Brandon Sanderson's magic. I haven't actually read any of his books, so I don't quite have the context for understanding this. But basically it was about how the strength of a magic system is directly proportional to how much the audience sort of understands what's going to happen in it.
Yeah.
So basically, if you have a magic system that no one understands, it's not going to be fulfilling when it's
not
used.
satisfying, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people take this to mean that you need like a hard magic system, which, we need the statistics on every enemy to know exactly, what beats what.
Yes.
And Stuck in Reddit Factory talked about how Pact kind of proves Sanderson right in completely the opposite way by making the softest magic system possible, but one that still totally lives up to that thing. Like, there's things surprise us and everything, but nothing ever really felt cheap. There was always it always fit into the existing systems in a way that I was like, oh yeah, okay, I see that now.
Yeah, it's such an intuitive and personal and creative magical system, which is something that I think is really hard to do, is to find one that is consistent but also very weird and creative, which is what magic kind of should feel like, right?
Yeah.
And it's done so well in Pact through this one core idea, which is theatricality really matters, right?
The concept of magic in Pact is that, like, alongside the physical building blocks of the universe, we have these spiritual building blocks which transfer power and effect through meaning. And then as soon as you move things to being based on meaning, not physics, suddenly you open up so many lateral doors to how things can be implemented. It's such a great way of beginning world building.
Yeah, it is a really great core concept, huh? And then you just add things like Evan, and you've got a real great book. I guess that's it, huh? That's Pact. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll have that live stream, which I guess will be a good way to say goodbye. So join us for that. I mean, I'd normally
Yes.
say that this is where we're doing a discussion question, but we're not. Because
Yeah.
we're just doing a live stream in a bit instead. So take the week to just chillax, come to terms with this story ending, I suppose.
Yeah, pop into the discussion thread. We can talk about the chapter. We can talk about All Packed Up.
Yep.
We'll still be around, frantically preparing.
Yep.
For Saturday. But yeah.
Yeah. What else? Leave us your thoughts in that discussion thread. Why don't you check out our Twitter, actually? That's a good thing you can do. Go to our Twitter, which is at MediaMD Podcast. I forgot it for a second, sorry. Where you can see Elliot's final live read. That's exciting.
Yes, that'll
see
be...
him cry in real time.
That'll be 24 hours after this episode comes out.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know what you can listen to now that Deep Impact is finishing, you got to head to doofmedia.com. That's where all the other shows that are worth listening to are. There's a fan art contest being run by the We've Got Worm guys, or We've Got Ward these days, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
That's ending in 2 days, I think, after this episode comes out, or like a day. So you're gonna have to scribble really fast to get them in if you're still working on it.
Yeah. Why don't you support the Doof Media Network now that we've reached the end of this podcast to see what they're doing next? There's all kinds of cool content on Doof Media. We alluded to Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality before. Our newest podcast to join the network is a discussion on that. If you want more internally consistent magical systems, then that's the podcast for you, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that's exclusive to our patrons. And it's definitely the best way to keep in touch with what's happening next in all aspects of Doof.
Yeah. Of course, support the man himself, Wildbow. You can head to his Patreon at patreon.com/Wildbow. He wrote this story. It's pretty good. We've done lots of content on it, so go and support him.
Yeah. I mean, he deserves it. This ending's so good. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so, apart from that, we'll see you all on Saturday, the 7th of March, or for some of you, Friday night, the 6th.
Yep.
As we dive into the epilogue and a whole bunch of other stuff that you can see in the show notes below. There's a schedule. We got a lot on, so I'm sure we'll see you all there.
That schedule tells you the time that it starts in your local time as well. We'll be on the Doof Media Twitch account, so if you want to go follow that, you get a little notification, or follow our Twitter and we'll notify you when we go live and everything. Whew. But yeah, see you all live in person for All Packed Up in about a week. So we'll see you then.
See ya.
Bye.